okay, no, ganz ehrlich, das ist der Grund, warum ich nicht in einer Serie wie Vikings mitspiele, weil das war, glaube ich, der beste Battlecry, den ich zusammenbringen würde. Ja, ich übe das nur bis morgen. Aber danke fürs Kommen. Wir sind jetzt beim Vikings-Panel und deswegen begrüße ich bei mir auf der Bühne mit einem riesen fetten Applaus MAUDE HIRST. Hello. Please have a seat, have a mic. I have a question. This is how things work. Should be on. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, now you can.
Now
Hi,
it is
everybody.
on. So, the first thing that I saw, I think let's start at the start. The first thing that I saw when I looked in your IMDb page is your first ever role in acting was in Harry Potter.
It was.
How did that come to be?
I was at a drama school since I was about 10 years old, and they were looking for classmates of Harry Potter, and so a few of us were called up. And I just did the first ever film, so I think I was 13 years old. I was a little baby, and yeah, we just did a few scenes. It was amazing, and at that time I was reading the books as well, so it was a very exciting, yeah.
Because we have a huge Harry Potter fan crowd here at Austria Comic Con as well. We had Afshan Assad, who played Padma last year on the stage, and it must be amazing to film in this Hogwarts location. I found out that you can book this location where the great dinner scenes were filmed. You can book that for your wedding. Well, if you ask Enrique how to rob a bank, and then I think you can buy it. But the thing is, you had the uncredited role as the Hogwarts student. So you said you filmed a few scenes. Which scenes were they, and where, how do we see you in these scenes?
You won't recognize me probably because I was in my awkward stage of teenage years, and I had little tiny short hair, and I was just a lot bigger than I am, and just looking very different. And they kept saying, whatever you do, don't look at the camera. And I'm like, in every scene. I filmed a lot in the Great Hall, which was amazing, and they had like real owls that would flow in. And there was one time we filmed one of the Great Hall scenes, and they tell you to eat your breakfast, so we were eating our breakfast, and then I ate all of my breakfast, and then there was 10 times doing the same scene, and by the end I was like, I wish I'd never eaten it. And then an owl would fly in, and one of the owls flew in and got knocked out and just flew straight into the wall. So I think they were quite difficult scenes to film, but it was a lot of fun.
And you said you were at drama school at the moment, at that time.
Yeah.
I read that your first big love in entertainment was gymnastics, that you started doing as a child. Where was that transition? Why did you first decide to do gymnastics, then movies, and where was this transition?
I was doing gymnastics. I think I just had a lot of energy as a child, and I was always upside down. I was always walking around on my hands. And it was actually doing a gymnastics class that a casting director spotted me because she was casting a film about gymnastics. And so I started auditioning. I probably was about 7 or 8 years old, and then I started auditioning, and I was the youngest of 3 siblings. My mum raised me, and so my eldest 2 siblings were really academic, and I was not quite as academically smart as they were. So then I started auditioning for films, and I really loved it from a really young age. I was like, maybe this is my own thing, and this is something that could be really interesting. So yeah, from quite a young age, I decided that I wanted to follow into the kind of acting world. And do something that was just a bit different and creative.
I mean, you come from a creative family, your father having created, well, Vikings, TUDORS, other things, many things. So what, you were brought to the creative life and the TV film life from very early on. But still, for you as an actress, for you as a child at that time, what were your big influences, your role models, idols?
Actor-wise?
Actor-wise.
I think I was always quite like old traditional. I've always kind of loved the old greats like the Judi Denches, the Helen Mirrens, the Susan Sarandons, and like all of the kind of really old actors that, not really old actors at the time, but just actors that had been around for ages and seemed to be able to be like chameleons. And they could play one character that was really interesting and then completely change into something else. And I always loved the idea of being an actor who could change completely from who you were and live a life of somebody else for a while. Which
is the definition of doing TV. Because with movies, you do it for a short period and then move on. But with TV, you can live 39 episodes of Vikings to date. And normally when you have a cast of a TV show there, Enrique said it, the Game of Thrones people always said it, it's kind of like a family. But with you, it is a family. With your father doing the creating and show running, your sister also acting in the show. Is that different for you to work with your own people than to have just random other actors and directors?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of actors that come from acting families. In the same way, Gustav, who played Floki, he comes from an acting dynasty as well. And I think because it runs in the family, there was just a creative thing. It didn't feel that different. And I didn't really work that closely with either Georgia or my dad in it. So the actual time on set didn't feel very like family orientated. But I think sometimes creativity runs in the blood. So I think it's kind of, you meet actors and people that feel like family all the time because it's like having that same brain. So it felt kind of normal actually just to have that there.
For me, when I watch something, I always get this feeling, so how did that came to be? And I think you were into the process of Vikings being created from a very early point in time on, because I'm sure you talked with your dad about his ideas, about his concepts, before the show was even pitched to the network at first. So what can you tell us about the process and the creative things that went into the show from very early on to the final product that we can watch?
I actually, interestingly, didn't really have that much involvement in it. I was raised by my mum, so my dad has always been somebody that has been this big creative in my life, but I actually didn't have much awareness that this was coming to play. But I know the amount of research, his fascination with history and in bringing historical things to life and giving people in history a real voice and a real humanity, which I think is fascinating. It's something that, I think a lot of actors love that when you can actually do the research into a character that really was there, or at least a kind of version of you that was there. And I think for my dad, that's his fascination. And I had the amazing chance to do that through Helga as well, like looking back through the mythology of the Vikings and through what kind of person Helga could have been, and having little bits of history to kind of dig into and figure out, like, how can I make this person human and also bring that bit of history to life. So it's a really fascinating thing to have a historical show, I think, that you can pull from real life in a way.
Yep. Once again, I'll remind the audience, I'll do this in German real quick. Wer eine Frage stellen möchte, geht einfach zum Mikrofon und tut es. Wir beißen nicht, wir sind keine echten Wikinger. I was just informing them, if they have a question, they can do it. They have a mic for themselves. If they don't, then I'll just ramble on. So when I recall, one of my favorite facts about Game of Thrones is the fact that for some props, they used IKEA rugs and made the dresses and coats. But for a show that is as costume heavy as Vikings, how can we even begin to comprehend how it feels for you to be in costume, in makeup, in mud, the entire day?
Yeah. It was an amazing experience that you can do so much as an actor to get yourself prepared and to get yourself ready to be in that, but stepping onto a set like Vikings was completely transformative because you have every department working together. There's the creatives that are doing makeup and hair, and then you've got the set designers, and everybody was doing their research to make it as real as possible, including using materials that were really from that time. And creating the weapons and the leather outfits and all of the things that we were wearing were actually materials, not all of them, but often, that were actually found in the time. So it was like literally stepping back in time. So when you were there, it was this, you didn't have to do that much work as the actor to imagine it, because you would literally walk into a set and be like, wow, this is otherworldly. It was this incredible thing that came together that I think it comes across on screen. It was like stepping into a movie-type scenario, and the scenes and the sets were amazing. So it was, and then we'd spend hours in hair and makeup, hours getting covered in dirt every day, and then taking off all the dirt at the end of the day, and things like even the details. When I I hope I'm not giving any spoilers, I'm imagining most of you have seen it, but when I got burnt and my neck scar, and you could barely see the burn on screen, but to get the scar, I had to go through this horrendous process of getting my face papier-mâchéed. So they like put me in this cast when my face was covered, just so they could then sculpt this incredible scar down my neck. And so the detail that goes into everything that looks kind of simple on screen is just so amazing, and it gives you, yeah, I think when that many creatives come together, magic happens.
Mm. I mean, for me, I don't like being dirty at all.
Me either.
So for me, that would be really hard to pull off. I will hold back. Bitte deine Frage.
Hello, I have two questions. And the first one is, what is your favorite character in Vikings?
My favorite character, probably slightly biased because I worked with him a lot, but was Floki. I think he was really interesting. There was like a darkness to him, and he was a really complex character. And I think I found him fascinating both as an actor and a character. And I also loved, I can't remember what his character was called, but George Blagden, who played the priest. He was in the first few seasons. I just found he was amazing because he was like the eyes of the audience, and it was this really interesting character that allowed the audience to come into the world, I think. I thought he was an amazing actor as well. So I'd probably say those two.
Ich weiß nicht, wie das. Wer ist besser, Ivar oder Björn?
Besser im Sinne von als Charakter oder als Person?
Ja.
Which character do you like more, Ivar
or Björn?
Björn, yes.
Or Björn?
I think, again, because I spent a lot more time with that character, and Helga always loved Björn, so I'm going to say I was always Team Björn. Thank you for your questions.
Danke dir, bitteschön.
I only have one question.
Yeah?
You played Helga, Loki's wife.
Yeah.
What was your feeling in acting when the wedding was with Loki?
It was wonderful. They did an amazing job. They didn't tell us how they were going to do the scene. So I turned up on the day and I hadn't seen my wedding dress. I hadn't seen the fact I was going to come on that amazing boat. So it was just like the best surprise. It felt like a magical, well, it felt like a wedding, but it was like so beautiful. And we had spent, because as you were saying, like in like a movie, you do it for a couple of months and it all finishes. With that, we'd spent years already by that point working together, and it just felt like a really magical moment. And me and Gustav, who plays Floki, are still really good friends, and that scene was magical for both of us. I think we both remember it, yeah, as this amazing moment where lots of the other actors were there, and it was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I was getting at before, I don't like to get dirty that much. But I know when you film a show like Vikings, this is part of the deal. Yeah. You can't get around this. But was there ever something you stumbled upon in the script and said, oh, I'm not going to do that?
Yes.
No. Dad? What did you write? No.
Often there was times you'd open it and be like, oh no. Mainly there was two things that were horrible to film. One, there was a scene where Gustav and I were in the water, and he was in the water, and then I had to walk in, and it was freezing. Dublin was always cold, but that particular day it was like ice, and we had wetsuits, heat pads, everything that you could possibly do, but as soon as you entered in the water you'd shiver, and then trying to act while you're shivering and you're not trying to like stutter, and it was impossible, and so that one was not my favorite. And the second thing is, every time there was any boat scenes, which, as I'm sure everyone knows, there's a lot of boat scenes in Vikings. If you get stuck on a boat for a day, you're literally stuck on the boat for a day. And to do one scene, you had to get all of the boats lined up. So to do one take would probably take about 3 hours, because you had to turn the ships around, go back out in the same formation, get everybody lined up, and then you'd have to do the take. So yeah, those were the two scenes that when you saw anything in water, you would be like, oh, not again. Mm-hmm. Here we go. But yeah, but also it was just great fun. And you're right, getting dirty is not my thing either, but eventually you get to the point where you're like, I'm so filthy, I'm just in it now. just gotta go with it.
It goes with the role, it goes with the fun, I think. But The freezing weather, I also heard from Game of Thrones a lot, that this is an issue, but you also filmed a lot under the sky, so when it's raining, when it's windy, when it's cold. Do you recall any extreme weather that maybe even delayed filming of certain things?
Yeah, we definitely had also for things like retakes, when you film something and then you have to go back and because something was missed, we'd have to often delay it because you could not predict island weather. So one day it would be terrible rain, the next day it would be quite sunny, so there was a lot of delays. But we had lots of like little tricks. We had like heat pads in our shoes, we had heat pads that you'd stick on different parts of your body because it was just, so freezing. And vice versa, there would be times where the sun would randomly come out and you were in layers and layers and leathers and fake furs. And then you'd have to film pretending it was a cold winter in Scandinavia, so you'd be sweating and at the same time have to like act as if it was freezing. So whichever extreme was quite difficult to manage. They always just say never film outside, never film with animals, and never film with children. And they're the three things that I pretty much filmed in the entire seasons. It was interesting and difficult, to manage, but again, still fun, and you're just in it.
But you also filmed on the open sea, because this, I think in that case, would be the fourth thing to never do. I recall that this was the biggest issue when they made Waterworld with Kevin Costner. They actually had to build the entire set of this town twice because it was completely flooded and destroyed. They even had a set from Pirates of the Caribbean, I think, was completely destroyed by some weather. But you were not hit with things like that.
Helga never really did the fighting. She was always a lover, not a fighter, which was, I think I had a lucky escape to not be really in the water very much, or like I think I got quite the lucky ticket to not have to be quite out in fighting, covered in blood and rain as some of the other characters.
Let's talk about the fighting. Did you enjoy hurting your co-stars? Like, no, I'm not gonna really hit you. Oh, sorry.
I didn't fight. There was part of me that wanted to do it, but the stunt coordinators were incredible. They were the stunt guys that had done all the huge fighting movies through the last few decades. And sometimes I would ask if I could be more violent. And I was like, can I just fight at least in one scene so I get to do some amazing choreography and get to be thrown around or get to punch somebody? And Helga always came back to, as Floki used to say, I was always too good, and I never had the fight in me. But I think the guys kind of loved it. I think secretly, and maybe not so secretly, they love to get out their male testosterone in those fights.
So, ich frage zum Schluss noch einmal, ob es vielleicht noch eine Frage aus dem Publikum gibt. Nope. Okay, so the last thing that we, of course, also talk about, you also acted in 9 episodes of the TUDORS, which is, it's also a period piece, also a costume piece, but completely different. So what drew you to this show, to Vikings? What is it when you read a character, when you read a script for a show, where you say, okay, I want to do this?
Going back to kind of what I said before, I think there's something so fascinating about bringing history to life and making it relatable in today's society. So I think when there's something that you can go back to and do the research, and I played Kat Ashley in the Tudors, and she was a real life person, and so there was, again, stuff that you could read, and how to make a fictional character real is something that I think is so fascinating. Every time I read a book and there's a character I like, I always have this vision of like, oh, how would that be to play that and to really get into the thing. So for me, it doesn't have to be historical, but when there's a character that's really interesting, I want to do it. I want to be able to become something different to who I am for a while. I think that we all like escapism, and for me, acting was always about embodying somebody else's life for a while, which I find, really fascinating.
Awesome. So I say thanks a lot for joining us here at Austria Comic Con. Oh, I forgot you. Bitte schön, natürlich, wir haben noch Zeit.
Thank you. What was your most challenging scene? Not just in a physical way, also to get in with your character?
The most challenging scene was when my baby died, and I had to bury her and Ragnar was there, and because I do feel like I love to fully embody the character, the pain of that was like emotionally so challenging, and on top of me living it as a character, I also felt a real sense of responsibility for anybody that had gone through that to represent it in a way that felt real. And the emotional, I mean, that stayed with me for weeks afterwards, because the kind of research that you do and feeling into what that would feel like was pretty daunting. So on an emotional level, that scene was the hardest. And then I think physically, the one when I was in the water, it was just like stepping into daggers of ice and then having to act on top of that. When you're that cold, it's like your brain just freezes and you can't really talk, and then you have to remember lines and remember where you're supposed to be standing, and then people are shouting stuff at you. And so there was, I'd say that was probably the most physical, challenging scene. Thank you, great question. Hi.
Sorry. If you could play in any movie or show that already exists, which one would you choose?
Oh, good question. Oh, gosh. I'm trying to think. I'd like to be in Breaking Bad. I know that's really random, but there is just that show for me still is the best thing I think I've ever seen. And I know I'm a girl, but I would love to play Aaron Paul's character. I can't remember what his character was called in Breaking Bad.
Aaron Paul's?
Yeah.
Jesse.
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 I know that's really random, and I'm just switching genders and doing it all, but I think like I've played a lot of historical stuff, and I really want to do stuff that's really like edgy and different, and so I think like something like that would be incredible. Thank you.
Danke dir. Möchte noch jemand? Ansonsten gibt es natürlich morgen noch einmal die Möglichkeit. Tomorrow we have another panel here on the main stage. So if there are any new questions forming in your head, please throw them at Maud and me tomorrow. Thanks a lot for coming. Thank you an awful lot for coming. This was Maud HIRST.
Thank you, guys. Mwah.